Back again. Another episode of a Muslim and an Atheist break bread. What you saying, Pop?
I'm good, man.
Yeah, man. Dust off them specs. So, we're gonna do today great civilizations, the kingdoms of Kush, which, from what I know, is one of the first civilizations. A region of Africa, but that's pretty much all I know about it. I don't know about who was.
I think
ruling.
Kushites is kind of Ethiopian region because that was the Kushite kingdom originally. So
Okay.
around the Ethiopia, kind of Egypt, Ethiopia, Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah. So you got like Kush, Samaria. Still find there's another one as well, another big one. Oh, what are they called now? Sumerians.
Don't know. Let's
Kushites.
watch it.
Alright, yeah. Alright, so let's jump into it. The Black Pharaohs, the Kingdom of Kush, great civilizations of the past. Pow!
The ancient Egyptians built one of the greatest empires in history, and despite facing many difficulties, managed to maintain their sovereignty over almost.
Before you say it, were they Egyptians or was it Egypt or was it Kemet?
Well, Egyptians never built anything. Long story short.
The entire Nile River Valley. But Africa has always been a gigantic continent, inhabited by many different peoples. Some wanted to conquer the fertile lands of Egypt. Kingdoms and tribes with origins in Libya, Syria, and Turkey were constantly fighting against Egypt. But there were a people whose tenacity and courage frightened even the powerful Egyptians. The Nubians were an African people who lived in the Nubia region in today's Sudan. The Nubian people have been living in that region for a long time. By 3100 BC, there would be Nubian villages along the River Nile. During much of their history, the Nubians did not develop any writing. Much of what we know about them is in the records left by the Egyptians. The Nubia was a region rich in gold veins, semi-precious stones, ebony wood, incense, and ivory. This wide range of resources encouraged the Egyptians to invade that region in search of extremely useful raw materials. The Nubians resisted the Egyptian invasions as much as possible, but they were militarily inferior and were progressively pushed south. Due to the various periods of instability in Egypt, the Nubians were able to organize more effective defenses. During periods of peace, Nubians and Egyptians traded and shared different forms of knowledge. During the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose I, the Nubians were part of the Egyptian Empire, but that dominion quickly collapsed, and the Nubians established a unified kingdom, with Napata as its capital. The Nubians thus founded the Kingdom of Kush, which would become a respected African power. The term Kushite kingdom comes from the Egyptians, who called the Nubian Kush. The founder of this new kingdom was a tribal leader named Alara, who became king of all the Nubians. With the Kushite kingdom established, the next step was to ensure its defense and economy. For this, Alara's successors reigned successfully, strengthening the kingdom and expanding their domains. The Kushites began to trade with Egypt through the Nile. They also established contact with the Arab kingdoms such as Nabatea and Sheba. The riches of the Kushites were extremely popular. Their leaders, priests, and even farm animals, like horses, were always embellished with pieces of gold and rubies. Over time, and due to the periods of instability in Egypt, the Kushites started to conquer Egyptian cities, including the city of Thebes. At the height of their power, under the command of King Paye, Egypt was fully conquered by the Kushites. King Paye declared himself the champion at the command of the god Amon. He joined his army, warred for over a year against several Egyptians, defeating everyone in his path. The phase of the Kushite and Egyptian history took place during the Third Intermediate Period of ancient Egypt, which began around the year 1070 BC. It is a period also historically known as the Nubian dynasty. The coexistence between Egyptians and Nubians originated marriages between the nobility of the two kingdoms. Both cultures influenced each other in religious and social matters. After consolidating the dominion in Egypt, King Paye returned to the city of Napata, capital of the Kushite kingdom, leaving his brother and successor to rule Egypt and its cities. Egypt remained under Kushite rule until 656 BC, and only weakened due to the Assyrian invasions, which conquered almost all of Egypt, causing turbulent Pharaohs' lands. The Assyrians were fearsome warriors, much superior militarily. They already used iron weapons and armor, besides siege weapons and a well-trained cavalry. The Kushite rulers had to retreat to Napata. Sometime later, they founded the city of Meroe further south. Meroe became the new capital of the Kushite kingdom. The Kushite rulers adopted the Egyptian custom of erecting pyramids, being buried in those built in the city. During this period, the Kushites began to develop their writing, the Meroitic script. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus claimed that the Kushite kings reigned until they received an order from the priests of the Golden Temple. When this happened, they committed suicide and passed the power to the next sovereign. This strange custom lasted until the reign of the leader Ergomenes, different from most of his compatriots. He was an educated man, having studied with Greek teachers.
That's it's interesting, isn't it, to say they ruled up until someone from the temple said, "Now you gotta go. Now it's time for you to go," and then they had to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about these kings?
Absolutely nothing. I've never heard this history before ever, so it's brand new to me. Where I'm struggling is, Egypt
Was
and
there
Kush,
before Kush?
but Egypt is a modern term and Kush is an old term, so why don't they just use both old terms and call Egypt what it was originally called?
Yeah.
And
learned philosophy.
when they started, they said the Egyptians, they put a lot of detail into making sure they described the Nubians and everything, but they didn't actually describe where the Egyptians came from.
Well, this is what I was just thinking, that in terms of the timeline, like what is this timeline? I don't think it's described that very well either, because like I said, yeah, as far as I was aware, Kush was around before Egypt.
Kush is the mother of Egypt.
Like, exactly. So for him to say, no, there was Egypt, then
correction,
the Nubians.
Kemet.
Yeah, Kemet. So then the Egyptians basically pushed the Nubians. Like Nubians, the term Nubia's been around since before, right? But they're the same people, and Kush, Nubian, same is what my man's saying. But it's saying that the Egyptians pushed them south.
Yeah, so who are the Egyptians?
And learned philosophy. When Ergomenes was ordered to commit suicide, he was furious. He sent his soldiers to the temple to kill the priests, putting an end to this custom. Women also had important roles in Kushite society, having an active voice in everyday matters. For several times, Kushite queens reigned without the interference of male companions. There are even reports of Kushite women who fought in battles and commanded troops. The king's mother was given the title of Candace, which means Queen Mother. She was the king and queen's advisor. On some occasions, she participated in political negotiations and could even take full command. One of these powerful women, and perhaps the bravest of her people, was Amani Shaketo, who reigned in Kush when Rome had already conquered Egypt after the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Rome demanded that the kingdom of Kush pay tribute to the Republic. Amani Shaketo did not accept this demand and considered it an offense, declaring war against Rome. Her soldiers advanced to pillage Egyptian cities under Roman rule. In 24 BC, the Kushites sacked the cities of Aswan, Philae, and Elephantine. They returned to Kush with prisoners, valuable objects, and Roman statues. Even the head of the statue of the Roman Emperor Augustus was taken by Amani Shaketo, in a gesture of contempt against the enemy. Upon learning this, Augustus sent Roman general Petronius and his soldiers to punish the Kushites. There are few details about the battle, but Petronius may have said that the Kushites had more than 30,000 warriors and were fighting with frightening fury. Amani Shaketo was described as a corpulent and rough woman. She led her troops and became blind in one eye and being wounded by a Roman. After more than 3 years of fighting, the Romans finally proposed a peace agreement. In the year 20 BC, Romans and Kushites signed a peace treaty. The Roman emperor recognized the kingdom of Kush as an independent power without being obliged to pay taxes to Rome. The kingdom of Kush lasted until AD 350, but due to a lack of resources and trade, the kingdom was very weakened and dispersed. The once rich and proud Kushite kingdom ended up dominated by the Aksum Empire, which expanded its borders from the region of Ethiopia. The Kushites were an incredible people with brave warriors, skilled craftsmen, and wise merchants. Their history shows us the strength and perseverance of the African people, capable of repelling even the powerful Roman Empire.
What do you think? That was a very brief.
I love it. But I'm just confused by the terminology that he's using. So I'm looking past all of that. The story itself is good.
I was going to say, sometimes we have to step away from the terminology because sometimes things are just used to... Because today's time, people like to call Egypt, innit? Like the same way they call Nigeria, Nigeria. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's because it's universal, innit? So when they're trying to get the message across, they're using that terminology just because it's universal. I'm going to say.
Nigeria is Nigeria.
But wasn't it Benin before?
Well, it was a different place then, and isn't Benin its own place? Benin is a country by itself, isn't it?
No, I'm sure Benin was Nigeria.
No.
Sure.
But maybe Benin is its own thing, because when they sacked Benin and took all the bronzes and statues, brought them to England, the kingdom of Benin is still there, because I know a man from Benin.
Okay.
So,
But yeah.
how they drew the lines on the map.
We'll have to look at that. That's a whole avenue in itself, and about the African
But
country.
with this, like I said, Nubia. Initially, he said the Kushites were Nubians, and then he kept referring to them as Kushites. Why not Nubians?
It just must be the region, innit?
Well,
like I said,
does Nubia exist today?
I don't know. Does it?
We're going to have to look at that in the next video, I'm going to say.
Yeah, defo, because I don't know. I know, like, Nubians, and people say they're Nubians, but I don't know, like, if there is actually a country or a place, Nubia, that still exists. I don't know. I can't tell you. So yeah, we'll have to look that up. But I thought it was quite good as well. Like I said, see, I didn't know anything. I don't really know nothing about the Kushites, as I said before. So other than that, I know it was one of the oldest civilizations. But the fact that you had like queens dominating and fighting back, you know, what they say was the greatest empire, Rome, or like they try and make out like Rome was the greatest empire ever.
The greatest army.
Yeah. So yeah, man. Shout out to the Kushites. And I feel like Africa's got such a rich history that we don't know about. Well, I don't feel like it has got such a rich history that we're just tiptoeing around at the moment, but we're gonna definitely be diving into it. I like the geopolitics of it as well, when we're talking about, because it did mention Sudan as well. Yeah, so we've got Ethiopia, Sudan, and then the Kushites in it, who all live along the Nile. Yeah. Even to this day, you got Ethiopia at the bottom of the Nile. But when we talk about the Nile, we're always thinking about Egypt. If you ever mention the Nile to anyone, they're going to talk about Egypt. They're not going to mention Ethiopia and the Nile in the same breath. But it's actually the Ethiopians that control the Nile.
It emanates from Ethiopia.
Yeah. So basically, if Egypt went to war with Ethiopia,
Which is very likely.
wow, it's a water war, isn't it? So all Ethiopia have to do is lock the Nile off. They can lock it off. There's a big dam that they control. If they lock that dam off, then Egypt's gonna suffer. So that's why there hasn't been a war. But yeah, so that was the Black Pharaohs, the Kingdom of Kush, Great Civilizations. We out. Peace.
Peace.